Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's almost a decade since taxpayers bailed out the Royal Bank of Scotland to the tune of tens of billions of pounds, and we seem no closer to getting our money back. The banking industry is worried that Brexit will hurt business, with fears that jobs and tax revenue could be moving overseas. Well, joining us now to discuss is the chairman of RBS, Sir Howard Davies. Sir Howard, many thanks for being with us. Seemingly these days, the government does little else than look inwards at its infighting. I mean, what is your assessment of where we are with these negotiations? Are you worried that they've taken their eye off the ball regarding Brexit?
I don't think they've taken their eye off the ball recently. I think what worries the business community is that it's taking quite a long time to get to the nitty-gritty of what a new trading relationship with the EU would be. And certainly some time, I think, has been wasted up to now in negotiations which haven't really got anywhere. Now, I would say, however, that over the summer, with the publication of quite a lot of position papers by the government and some meetings with the business community of a more intense kind than before, there are signs that they do appreciate that it's really urgent to get to the proper negotiations. And therefore, I think that Theresa May's Florence speech was a significant step forward. Whether a big enough step to unblock the negotiations, we'll only see in the next few weeks.
But do you get the impression that they appreciate the damage is already being done to the banking sector? You're having to set aside funds for relocation, potential relocation. Yes. You're making sure you've got plenty of liquidity at the moment. Do they recognise the fact that banks are already beginning to suffer?
I hope so, because we keep telling them, and I think the financial sector has been telling them very, very firmly. Now, some of this, of course, is inevitable. I'm afraid that if we go in for Brexit, we will find that jobs will leave the city and that there will be a rebalancing of financial activity within Europe. The city has been astonishingly dominant in European financial markets in recent years. So some of it is going to happen.
Just to be clear about that, we will lose jobs in the city as a result of Brexit. We will lose jobs at RBS as a result of Brexit.
In our case, it'll be relatively small because we are not a very large player in European financial markets. We have some lending there, which will carry on, and we have some financial markets activity, trading, foreign exchange and things, and we're going to have to set up a subsidiary in Amsterdam unless an unusually favourable...
What's then your assessment of the damage to the city as a whole?
I think it's going to be quite considerable over time, because up to now, people have centred their European activities, and we're talking particularly about the American banks, the Japanese banks, even the Chinese banks, and they have chosen to put the enormous lion's share of their activity in Europe based in London. And they're now rebalancing. That's going to happen, whatever the outcome of the Brexit negotiations are. So the game is, can we provide an outcome which minimises that cost? It'll not remove it. It'll definitely be a cost. And the question is, can we negotiate enough market access so that that cost is at the margin, is a few thousand people, not tens of thousands?
I mean, could that cost be catastrophic, particularly if, as seems increasingly likely, we have a no-deal Brexit?
That would be bad news, because I think then some quite large moves of people would take place, and you can already see some signs of the impact. London property prices are starting to fall compared to the rest of the country, and that's particularly because...
But so many would say about time.
One has to say, you're asking me about the financial sector, I'm giving you the answer. Some people would say, well, hey, these guys deserved it, and maybe we've had finance has been too dominant in the economy, and there's some reasonable arguments there. But if you ask me, will this affect the city, my answer is yes.
Transition appears to be the most pressing issue. What point is too late to discover the details of the transition period?
I think if there are no details by the first quarter of next year, the number of moves of people out of London will accelerate, because the Bank of England has asked every financial institution in London to prepare a contingency plan in the event of a hard Brexit. And people have therefore scurried around, and we've said, well, we're going to put some people in Amsterdam if that happens, etc., etc. And if nothing is certain by the end of the first quarter of next year, by March, say, then I think people will trigger those contingency plans, because they won't have time to get them in place by March 2019 unless they start at least a year ahead. So that's the moment at which we need to know what the transition arrangements are.
And of course, there's more than just working out the transitional agreement on the government's plate at the moment. They maintain that you can't work out the transitional deal until you've worked out the end relationship between the two. I mean, simply put, can it all be negotiated in time?
Well, it's very, very, very tight now, very tight indeed. And I think what we're seeing now is the unwisdom of triggering Article 50 when we did without knowing what the end point was. And I'm not sure why we really did that. Perhaps that was purely domestic political reasons. But it didn't start the negotiations off in a good way. And on the other side, there are undoubtedly people in continental Europe who think that the longer they drag this out, the more people will decide to relocate to Paris or Amsterdam or Frankfurt. So they have no incentive to get on with this. That is the real problem.
Of course, people voted to leave the European Union for a variety of reasons, but do you accept the fact that you can join the dots, so to speak, between the collapse of the banks back in 2008 and the decision taken to leave the European Union?
I think it's a little bit of a tenuous argument.
Really, the huge anger that was directed at the establishment in the form of the banking industry, the tens of billions of pounds of taxpayers' money that made its way to your institution, you don't see a link between that and the decision to take back control?
I understand the argument, but I would note that the anti-European sentiments in the UK date back a lot further than the financial crisis. The UK has been a hesitant partner in the European Union throughout. If you look back at opinion polls about people's views on whether they should stay in the EU or not, they do not show a very sharp distinction between the years before 2008-9 and the years after. You cannot see that very visibly. What I would accept is that the recovery from the financial crisis has been weak for many people. Real earnings have stagnated. So people have gone through a period where they have not seen their living standards improve, and they are looking for people...
I mean, some people have. You know, the bankers at the top of RBS who received, what, £17 billion in
no, they have...
16 million last year. You know,
they have not. That's just simply wrong that bankers have gone up. I mean, banker bonuses have gone down at RBS and elsewhere quite a lot since the crisis. You can still say that they are higher than other people would like to see.
The point I was making was you mentioned stagnating wages, particularly in the public sector. You know, we're never going to get our money back that we put into RBS, are we?
Not all of it, no. But your introduction was saying we are no nearer to getting money back is wrong. You are nearer to getting
all of our money back.
No, nearer to getting all of the money back, but you're going to get quite a bit back, I believe. We've got one or two outstanding problems in the US to resolve, but thereafter I think there's a reasonable prospect that the government can sell the shares.
At what price? I mean, currently it's what, 230? I mean,
no, about 270 now.
Right, but that's...
I can't tell you, I can't forecast what the price is going to be. It will not be the price at which the government paid. I completely accept that.
Do you understand then why there remains this residual anger directed at institutions like RBS?
I quite understand it. I think it's there were catastrophic failures in the financial crisis made by the management of RBS, but one, if you like. I became chairman 2 years ago. Undoubtedly, there were mistakes made which are impossible to excuse, and I can quite see that.
Should Fred Goodwin have gone to jail?
The criminal law is not very suitable for the kinds of errors that were made in the financial crisis, and the attempts made in the US and here to pin criminal responsibility on people at the top have not on the whole been successful, because you'd have to prove intent, deliberate criminal intent in order to prove that.
That begs a final question. Should the legal system be changed to ensure that in future individuals like Fred Goodwin could end up in jail?
It has been changed. There is now a regime of senior management responsibilities which imply to all individuals, including me at the top of banks, which strengthen the accountability and individual responsibility in a way that was not the case before the crisis.
Sir Howard, many thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.